There were a number of threats made, and we thought that it would be best if we moved the production from Miami to California.
We shot it in LA, we shot it in Santa Barbara, we shot it in New York, and then we went to Florida for about, I'd say we shot 2 weeks there. And when we went back in, we had all kinds of bodyguards, but we were originally going to shoot the whole movie there.
¿Cómo se llama?
Antonio Montana. And you? What you call yourself?
Tony Montana, who was named, by the way, after my star at that time was Joe Montana, because I was a big 49er fan, and I was looking around for a good name, and I thought Montana, the mountain, Montana.
I think the most stunning thing about Al is his face. He's the kind of guy that can hold the screen with his face. When you start a movie, you sort of want to give the lead character a very impressive entrance. And that face, that character, the crazy shirt he's wearing, the scar, the way he moves, the way he talks. You just want to really hit them because you're hitting them with something they've never seen before. A lot of this had been reported on the news, but nobody had ever seen it in a movie before. And to see these Cuban gangsters and the way they talked, the way they moved, and he just sort of embodied that in that close-up. It's a very well-written scene by Oliver.
I think Brian's ideas on the opening of Scarface were very interesting to me, and it was very, again, against the grain, so to speak. Instead of using these big, wide crane shot or something to introduce the character, he introduces him in a close-up, sitting in a chair, and he had the camera roll around him 360 degrees all the way around him. He did the performance to take about maybe 5, 6 takes like that, and they were all close. They were all close, and I thought, what a fascinating thing. In other words, he was introducing that face to the audience, and the script is so good, you also felt the personality coming out of him. You know, that arrogant behavior, that Latin machismo coming out of this man with a scar on his face.
Where'd you get the beauty scar, tough guy? Eating pussy?
How am I going to get a scar like that eating pussy?
I was very worried that it looked phony, it was too big, it was too small, so we did many makeup tests until we came up with something we all sort of liked.
I felt this character was good with a knife and had fought with a knife. And the scar really came from one of those fights, and I thought it would be interesting if it got to the eyebrow, and the action pulled my head away and it went down even further into this part of the face. So there's one up here and here. I like the different places because I think it was evocative of a chaotic wildness in this guy, that he was all over the place. He had one here and one there, you know.
I think Brian has an affinity for doing the high crane shots, the straight down shots, the bird's eye view of things. And some of the things in Scarface were born out of necessity. For instance, the opening internment camp that was under the freeways and so on. If we had been leveled off, you would have seen that it was Los Angeles and not Miami. And also he was giving you that sort of introduction as if you're coming from heaven just to come down and to take a look at these people that are interned. He likes to move the camera a lot, but he doesn't do it arbitrarily. I don't think he does it just what I call cinematic gymnastics. He does camera moves that are an integral part of the story.
Other than the personal events, the wars, the actual drug wars, the actual massacres, the Chainsaw Massacre, were all based on real incidents, very much so. We got a big assist from the U.S. Attorney's Office down there. And they showed us their files, and they showed us their tapes, their videotapes of crime scenes, all of the violence in this film that didn't happen.
They didn't just kill each other in these drug wars. They literally chopped people up and found them sawed up in a trash can outside a 7-Eleven. So I wanted to establish a level of violence that nobody had ever seen before, because this is a whole different level of mob interaction. Not the sort of pleasant shootouts of this Godfather or stranglings or people being stabbed in the hand. Now we're into really terrible ways of killing each other. And I wanted to get it over early in the movie to set up, say, this is what it is. We're in a whole different world here.
The chainsaw scene was based on an event I heard about, because I hung out with Miami County of Miami and Dade County, and I also hung out with Fort Lauderdale, which had another whole history. So I hung out with 3 different departments, and the case histories were pretty thick on murders. Definitely, the saw had been used.
The scene was basically written by Oliver, and I just had to figure out a way of doing it, which, you know, wouldn't turn into the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
That is a vintage De Palma technique. And you can feel it when you're doing it, that he set things up in such a way with such a strong visual understanding of what he wanted to do with that and how he wanted to build it. So I just marvel at it. I was in the scene and I felt as though it was so laid out and so completely mapped out that it wasn't difficult to do.
Yes, of course, sir.
Yeah, it's very important.
Yes, I understand. It's important.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
He had a giant crane move that Brian designed from the motel, and to see Stephen Bauer playing with a girl in a bathing suit and then back again and building that tension. And that sweeping moves, I call those director's points of view, as if I voyeuristically, if I could do that, I'd fly up and look through the window. I couldn't see, I'd come down and fly down. So to me, that's the feeling that he was giving me. Inside the motel room, everyone that I meet usually says, my God, that scene where they cut off his arm was terrible. I said, you never see it. You see it off of Pacino's face, you see it off of reactions, but you never see it. I said, that to me is good directing, because to leave you with the taste that you've seen something that actually hadn't happened.
Well, it was interesting, when Scarface first came out, the scene, the shower scene, was picked on by almost every major reviewer in this country as something that was extremely violent, that was disgusting. But if you take a look at that scene very closely, we show nothing. All it is sound. There's sound and a man's face and blood. But there's nothing that goes on in that scene. You saw nothing. It was something that permeated the audience's imagination, which was brilliant filmmaking. It was I mean, that's probably one of the most interesting that Brian ever did.
When you do a scene like that, there are props around that you use or don't use. And though we may have had body parts to be hanging, if we shot them, we never used them, or we didn't shoot them. But the intention was always suggest what was happening. You could hear it. You didn't have to see it. You want to set up the world these guys are in, and once you set up a terrifically violent scene early in a movie, you don't really have to do much more after that.
I expected Brian to give us his elaborate details of how he wanted the picture to look and what he wanted to work with. And all he said is, John, I want you to give me the most beautiful pictures, and I'm going to put violence inside.
The movie was supposed to be shocking. It's a shocking world, and these are like gangsters you've never seen before. Well, it was shot in a couple of parts. We hung F. Murray from a crane, basically. But the stuntman, Dick Zeiker, had to leap out of the helicopter with a noose around his neck, and it had never been done before. That was a kind of tense day, as I recall. We had a couple of cameras on it, and they flew around, and then they literally tossed him out of the plane. And then we, intercut it with, Murray hanging from a crane. I want to do a kind of high-tech, neon, acrylic, vibrant pastels instead of your usual dark film noir, because you looked at South Florida and this is what it was all about. These guys dressed in white, not black. Scarfiati came up with a whole great look for the movie, and he was just a genius.
The Babylon Club in Scarface, an extraordinary set that Nando Scarfiati designed. And he warned me before I saw the set. And he didn't warn me as much as asked me, he said, do you mind mirrors? And I said, no, I don't mind mirrors. I figured 1 or 2 mirrors here. I walk on there and there's 15 panels of mirrors all the way around. And to add to the dilemma, Brian says, I'd like to shoot 2 and 3 cameras. So that made it even funnier because I had to check each camera to make sure the mirrors were not reflecting itself or the other camera. And that when they were to be destroyed with gunshot, that we weren't going to get an accidental reflection. Stan Parks and Ken Papio are the mechanical effects men. These guys were in charge of the explosions, the pyrotechnics, and all that. They're extremely talented men, and the fear that I had, everybody had, that these mirrors exploding so close to Pacino, that, you know, flying glass and so on, because they couldn't really be plastic, see, because if they were plastic, they wouldn't break. They had to be plate glass so that they would have the implosion. What they did was very, very clever. They were able to more or less implode them so that they could take the pellets away from Pacino's face.
And then we go on the set. These sets were like, fuck. You know, we'd read it. We'd been reading it for months, you know, and suddenly there it is, you know. They built these things, you know, at Universal, and the sound stages at Universal. And we'd walk on, it's like, oh, now I know where I am. And like, boom, we were there.
Manny, look at this pelican fly. Come on, pelican.
The humor was a part of what I thought right from the start would be necessary in order to get this guy so that you could laugh at him also, because if not, it was just going to be a one-way street.
Playtime is over, okay?
That's a Carla.
It looks like somebody's nightmare.
You needed to find those odd things, those twists, those ironies, to give the character some intelligence too, you know, so that there was something else going on also. Otherwise, it would be too blunt and too hard to take, I think.
What the fuck was that? What you just did?
That's it. That's what you do.
That is disgusting.
Watch.
Ooh, look at that fucking thing. That looks like a lizard. Like a bug coming out of your mouth.
Oliver said, in the scene, you do this thing, you know, have you ever done that? And I said, do that? And he goes, it's this thing. I saw this guy in Miami do this thing, with, you know, with a tongue. And I said, you saw somebody do that? He goes, yeah. And I go, yeah, what? And he probably got slapped. He goes, that's what happens. You get slapped. And he goes, yeah, but do it. I mean, like, really do it. Can you do it? And I said, well, I'll practice, you know. And I start doing it, you know, and he goes, oh, you're Manny. Oh, it's perfect. Show Brian, you know.
You know, if I wasn't a nice guy, I'd
Come on, it's too big for you. Come on. Cause trouble like that. Come on.
Bitch.
What I try to tell you?
Lesbian.
Well, I think it's important to establish that, you know, robbers, they sort of enjoy the money they rob. I mean, you know, they have a good time. The cocaine world is a crazy world. It's not all grim death and murder. I mean, you know, it's fun. The clubs should be fun. The girls should be fun. It's a price to pay for all this, but you got to show that why they're there.
Tony gets the American dream, but it's hollow because there's nothing going on spiritually. He can't love. He can't love Michelle Pfeiffer. He can't reach across. He can't connect.
I have Nick, the pig, as a friend. What kind of life is that? Can't you see what we're becoming to?
All he can love is his sister, his blood, but his ability to imagine a form of love outside himself is gone by the materialism that surrounds him, is destroyed by it.
Is this it? This what it's all about, Manny?
The only memory I have of that is putting myself in a kind of trance-like state, because I was in a coked-up state as the character. So I found myself every day going into this room with all these guns and all this smoke and all this hell, actually, and I would put myself in some kind of give myself a kind of mantra and just go in, bite the bullet, and, you know, spend the 12, 14 hours there every day in, day out, just shooting that sequence.
Say hello to my little friend!
Once you find that you get into a rhythm, and if you're relaxed when you're doing it, you can take anything. You get zen about it, because if you, for once, take a look around you, it's just unendurable.
A lot of times when guns are shooting, you don't see the flash, and when you see a gun shoot, you like to see the flash. And so we rigged up something that synchronize the flashing to the shutter of the camera so that you could see the flashing all the time.
Ken Papio and Stan designed this synchronization system for the weapons so that the camera shutter is open to see the flame, and Pacino can't fire it unless the shutter is open. And it sort of drove Pacino crazy a little bit because he pressed the trigger and it wouldn't fire until the camera was perfectly in sync with his flash. And it got a little testy there because he wanted the freedom of it. But it worked out very good. These men were very talented men.
We had a lot of time to shoot that because Al burned himself badly on one of the guns. And so I basically had to shoot like 2 weeks without Al, so I had a lot of time to shoot the Colombians doing things.
I'm trying to think how many cameras we used in Climax. I'm not sure. I think we had one on a crane, and we had 2 down below, and a third one. May have been 4, maybe 4 or 5 cameras that we had. We had a slow motion camera that was prepared to shoot the stuntman as he got hit, or Pacino as the squibs were going off. We had 1 camera in slow motion. We may have had 5 cameras on that sequence.
Steven, a very old friend of mine, came over to the set and thought this was great and said, I got an idea, let's put a camera over here. I said, fantastic. So we stuck a camera, I think it was a low angle camera over on the side, and it was used for when the Colombians first come into the house.
It probably took more than half a day just to line up exactly where the cameras were going to go. And it took 2 days to get the stunt of the man falling. I say it took 2 days because it wasn't really working right the first time. And he had to hold his breath, too, when he landed there because Brian wanted to keep shooting for a long time.
I thought it was very important that we dedicate the movie to Howard Hawks and Ben Heck because that was always the inspiration for it.
The theme for Tony had to reflect the character and the person of Al Pacino, and of course of the character of the movie. And it has to be a little dangerous, a little suspenseful, but a little deep too. And I think it reflects quite well that atmosphere which was at that time in Miami with all the crime and all that stuff. The theme for the 2 girls was a little tricky because I wanted to have the same feel for both because Tony is in love with the sister and in love with Elvira. And so the sounds are very similar. The melodies are slightly different, but that was done in purpose so to create a little bit of an ambiguity and to show the people that Tony is in love with both.
The gentleman that was head of the MPAA at that point had a very strong negative feeling about this film in terms of its violence and in terms of its language.
Fuck anything and anyone for a fucking
Can't
buck.
you stop saying fuck all the time?
But the language was a big problem to him, and he threatened us, not only threatened us, but he stamped an X rating on this film.
We discussed what they thought was bothering them, and then I made an adjustment, and I sent it back to them a second time. They gave us an X again. Then I cut it back a third time, and they were sort of fixated on how many gun hits were in the clown. And I was thinking, the clown, they're worried about the gun hits in the clown. So this is the third time I sent it back, and they still gave us an X. And the studio, of course, was saying to me, solve this. You know, we can't release an X movie. But I wasn't going to cut it anymore. I felt it was against what the material was. I didn't think it was overly violent. I thought it was just showing the world of these people. And I thought it was affecting the dramatic thrust of the movie. So I said, I'm not doing this anymore. I think we're going to hurt the movie. And then I basically got on the phone, and I called some of my reporter friends nobody knew about, And I said, this is an outrage. So there was tremendous amount of articles.
And I went to arbitration on this, except I went prepared for literally a court case. I brought in 3 psychiatrists, 3 experts in this field. I brought in Time magazine. I brought in the police officer, the head of the Organized Crime Bureau from Miami, in terms of how this would affect children, the fact that it was an anti-drug film and how important it was for it to be made. And we conducted this thing. We conducted this like a trial, and we beat him. We beat him hands down. The vote was 18-2 in favor of our getting an R rating.
Basically, somebody said, we gotta let the world know it's happening. And that's what I think swayed them, and we won. Now, there's something that gets completely confused all the time. Because I cut the picture back 3 times, everybody assumes they saw the 3rd cut. But I called the head of the studio, and I said, if I have an X on the 3rd version, I have an X on the 1st version. The initial version, they're all X's. Why don't I just go with the 1st version? And they said, oh, no, you can't do that. And I said, why not? An X is an X, isn't it? So what the version you see in Scarface is the original version that I cut. It's not changed, it has not been cut back, and that's what we fought over, and that's what we won with.
When I first saw the movie, I thought that Brian had achieved that operatic style. I thought it would be controversial, though. I thought that there would be a reaction to it, that it would affect a certain kind of criticism. But it was the movie Brian set out to make, and I thought he achieved it. And I was pleased.
At the first screening, actually, first screening in New York, Martin Scorsese was sitting in front of me. And I was a nervous wreck. And he turned around in the middle of it and he said, they're gonna hate this film, but they're gonna love it too. He said, people are gonna love this. He says, you guys are on. You're right there, you're on, you're dead on. And he says, you're onto something, you know.
When I saw the film, I was very proud of it. It was, one of my children. I'd go on the New York subways and I'd hear dialogue from the picture. I knew that it had hit a nerve.
When Scarface was reviewed and released, we did very well business-wise, but review-wise, we did terribly. There wasn't a major reviewer in this country, with the exception of Vincent Canby of the New York Times, who thought this wasn't garbage. Now, these same reviewers have pointed to Scarface as the consummate gangster film, as the landmark gangster film.